Health Minister dictates nonsensical new regulations. All remaining COVID restrictions in South Africa, initially announced under the National State of Disaster and extended on April 4, 2022, as temporary transitional measures, were meant to be dropped from midnight on May 4, 2022, 30 days after the transitional measures were announced by the President. Instead, shortly before midnight on May 4, the Health Minister hastily announced new regulations as amendments to the existing Health Act, perpetuating mask mandates indoors, negative tests for unvaccinated travelers, and capacity limits for venues and gatherings. While the new regulations are slightly better than the previous transitional measures, the government should in fact have just done away completely with all remaining COVID restrictions such as entry requirements, mask mandates, and capacity limits on venues. The COVID pandemic is not over, but it is no longer a public health emergency, and these measures won't make a meaningful difference. More on that later. It is a travesty that these regulations were implemented by amendments to existing permanent legislation under the Health Act, essentially granting the Minister of Health the same power as the Coronavirus Command Council had under the state of disaster. And we know what the government did with that power. They banned cigarettes and liquor sales, banned us from online shopping, banned us from going to the beach, banned even sandals and cooked chicken. They abused their power and promulgated completely nonsensical and unscientific regulations. Now the minister has announced new regulations that perpetuate most of the transitional measures, turning them into permanent law under the Health Act, without due process and without the required 90 days of public comment. By my limited legal understanding, these regulations are unlawful and unconstitutional. The health minister doesn't have the authority to do what he did. The regulations that were announced are also unscientific, and won't make a meaningful difference. Cloth masks and cheap surgical masks don't prevent the transmission of an airborne virus. If they did, we would have stopped this pandemic in its tracks back in March or April 2020 when mask mandates were first implemented. At that time, we had a valid excuse. The WHO said the novel coronavirus was not airborne but spread by droplets. Now we know better, and over 80% of South Africans have been infected despite wearing masks for the last 2 years. There is no excuse now, and no valid reason to perpetuate unscientific, ineffective, and unconstitutional mask mandates. Same with entry requirements. Under the new regulations, a 10-year-old with COVID, or a vaccinated adult with COVID, can get on a plane and enter so without a negative test. This shows how completely pointless the negative test requirement is for unvaccinated travelers. Vaccination doesn't stop you from getting or spreading the virus. The virus is endemic everywhere. The strict border controls and nonsensical travel bans that were implemented after Omicron was discovered, failed to stop Omicron from spreading all around the world. These measures did nothing to stop the virus, but they did massive damage to tourism. We need to drop all entry requirements, as many other countries have done already. Screening for proof of vaccination or a negative test at the border is a useless tool that makes no meaningful difference. The arbitrary venue capacity limits likewise make no sense. There is no science or data that says limiting capacity to 50% or 1,000 people will prevent or reduce the spread. For an airborne virus, social distancing and venue limits are pointless. Those ideas are based on an outdated assumption that the virus was primarily spread by droplets. If masks, social distancing, limits on indoor gatherings and border controls worked, why did almost everyone in South Africa and around the world get COVID anyway, despite strict mask mandates, social distancing, restrictions on indoor gatherings, border controls, and travel bans? Even our top scientists have strongly criticized the draft health regulations and called for the lifting of all remaining border restrictions and other COVID-19 regulations, as they will not meaningfully alter the course of the epidemic of COVID-19 in South Africa. Since we know the virus is airborne and none of these measures have worked to contain the virus, Why does our government perpetuate ineffective, pseudo-scientific regulations, knowing the ongoing damage that is being done to the events industry and tourism sector? And why do they do so without following the correct legal process, sidestepping all checks and balances? This sets a dangerous precedent. These new regulations that were announced are now said to be part of permanent legislation in our Health Act and can be turned on or off at the minister's discretion, without the existence of a state of disaster and without any process of public participation. It appears that our government has become a law unto itself, and this charade is no longer about public health. We South Africans tolerate such regulatory overreach at our own peril. These new regulations and unconstitutional powers claimed by the health minister need to be challenged if we love freedom and don't want to see South Africa gradually descend into Chinese-style autocratic socialism. MICE recovery spiced with challenges and opportunities. The MICE sector of the economy is of immense value and importance to the travel and tourism industries. Travel and tourism are the moving service parts that knit most events together. Whether it is travel from diversified departures, to ground arrangements plus accommodation and perhaps a number of DMC-related requirements, the travel and tourism sector is pivotal for at least 70% of MICE undertakings. There is a perception that if an individual has successfully planned one event, the person can plan any event. This is far from the truth unless one is blindly undertaking a logistical standard decor brief or similar. No two events are created equally. The dynamics of the circumstances and background, together with the raison d'être, prevent identical planning criteria from being used each and every time. So the significance of the all-important strategic aspects of MICE undertakings cannot be overestimated if the undertaking is to be successful, while justifying the financial outlay. Percentages worth noting. MICE undertakings, irrespective of type or capacity, emanate from three sectors. Dependent on the sector, the planning and motivation to have an event vary a great deal. Below are the sectors and a brief explanation of each. Corporate, approximately 55% of the MICE market. The list of event types is almost endless and ranges from a capacity of 10 to around 500. Rarely are corporate events over 1,000 unless a major product launch, personnel motivation, or similar is underway. The type of corporation is the same as the JSE sector listings. Although a number may not be listed on the JSE- from financial institutions through to consumer products, these sector listings provide an indication of the range and type of corporate entities. Association, approximately 30% of the MICE market. Events are mainly member-oriented, although the association sector is more complex in its reason for existence, raison d'être. A member association is either a. occupation-led, such as accountants, public relations practitioners, HR professionals, and the like, or b. supplier, services-led such as security, events, decor et al. The type of event undertakings, especially in the occupation-led associations, range from educational with limited numbers to many thousands for their regular flagship conventions. Public, approximately 15% of the MICE market. The government market is known to have many various groups. Besides national, provincial, and local, there are a further 8, which range from community service centers, SOs, public institutions, diplomatic corps, development organizations, tourism authorities, etc. The majority of their gatherings are within their own premises, although, as we are all aware, a number of events are hurriedly convened by national and provincial governments. Recovery is on the cards with caveats. The return to pre-COVID days is proving unlikely, in the foreseeable future, as we enter the latter half of 2022. With a South African surplus, beyond current requirements, of the main supplier being venues of all shapes, sizes, and standards without accommodation, MICE suppliers, and indeed other necessary services, will need to be innovative to be sustainable in the long term. Corporate sector, bin counters take charge. The most significant changes are within 55% of the market share. The advent of virtual and hybrid opportunities being perfected to meet the needs of the average corporation, coupled adversely with the rise in transport costs, time-related traffic constraints plus COVID restriction hindrances, suppliers, services, and independent planners need to think through and be seriously clever in how to draw the corporations back to almost total in-person events. At this time, mid-2022, there is upward movement, yet limited to around 50% of bookings compared with the pre-COVID salad days. Corporations are getting financially savvy when it comes to MICE spending and are demanding more bang for their buck. The days of no work for a day's commission are being carefully assessed. The almost meteoric rise of high-powered motivational rah-rah events from late 2021 into 2022 is proof positive that corporations need to get their personnel on the right trajectory of togetherness going forward, coupled with demonstrating eagerness to go out there and get them to buy that product right here and right now. Association sector, the good and the not so good. Within the occupation-led associations, the hiatus will change and build momentum as virtual and hybrid are unlikely to replace the in-person dynamics of communicating face-to-face with like-minded professional colleagues. The opportunity of a linked exhibition, convex, of new products and services will add to the resurgence. Exhibition organizers should consider being more proactive in this regard without overshadowing the plenary and breakouts. However, the same cannot be envisaged for the supplier, service-led associations. Member renewals have dropped significantly, and other members have altered course or sought greener pastures. A number of loyal souls are questioning the member fees against merely meeting to communicate on a neutral playing field and perhaps discovering new ideas and/or business. A whole new series of real incentives should be sought for members to enthusiastically contribute to the association's coffers. Public sector, trial and error plus hope. As serious economic challenges continue to loom, from power supply to employment to investment et al., the national government, in particular, will mount high-powered conferences replete with informed and renowned national and international presenters, sages on the stages, as well as top-drawer delegations, budget constraints being of limited concern. Growth in the first half of 2022 is evidence of this and will continue as and when a specific crisis demands immediate communication, hopefully resulting in both a positive outcome together with an equally good PR result due exclusively to face-to-face dialogue. Opportunities. Suppliers and services need to ask serious questions about what would appeal to that particular sector's management. Longer lead time booking incentives, gratis professional brand welcome signage, and more conducive or smart payment terms come to mind. There are green shoots and lots of light at the end of the tunnel yet unless suppliers and services, including travel and tourism, get a better handle on the type of potential MICE client out there, the more a number will just manage to get by or disappear. The opportunities are enormous, yet ignorance may prove to be disastrous.